They tried to send me to a nursing home. That sentence still echoes in my mind as I sit quietly in my sunlit kitchen, sipping the coffee I brewed myself. My own son, David, signed the papers without hesitation. And Melissa, my daughter-in-law, smiled that thin, victorious smile, like she had finally won. They thought I was weak. They assumed I'd crumble. They had no idea what I owned. I remember the day clearly. David had called with what sounded like casual concern, but urgency underlined his tone. "Mom, we need to discuss your future," he said softly. "We want to make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. A euphemism for being pushed aside, forgotten, placed somewhere I had no say in. My heart sank. I had poured my life into my family, sacrificed, supported them, and now they were attempting to erase me, to decide for me, without asking, without respect. Melissa had been the orchestrator, quiet and precise. That smile of hers when David mentioned the papers, it was smug, calculated. She didn't see me as a mother, a woman, or a person with her own mind. It was an obstacle to move out of the way. As I stood holding the envelope confirming their intentions, anger bubbled beneath the surface, but so did clarity. This wasn't the moment for panic. It was the moment for observation, for strategy. I would not let them underestimate me. I leaned back, imagining all the ways they assumed I was powerless. The house, the memories, the paintings, the furniture. They thought none of it belonged to me. Every asset, every document tucked away, every account, they were mine. Soon, they would realize it. Before confrontation, I had to understand motives fully. David believed he was responsible, helping. Melissa thrived on control, using the papers as her tool. Together, they assumed I'd comply quietly. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the morning bustle outside. The neighbors, the mailman. Distant laughter, it seemed ordinary. Yet within my home, the battle had begun. I could feel the tension in the walls, the silent expectation of my submission. But submission was never my way. A thought struck me sharply. Their mistake wasn't thinking I was old. Their mistake was assuming old meant powerless. Now, the plan I had nurtured quietly for years, the knowledge. Contacts, small investments they dismissed, was about to become my weapon. I leaned forward and whispered, a quiet vow. They think I'm weak. They think I will break. But I will not. Not now, not ever. A small, deliberate smirk crept across my face. Revenge wouldn't be loud or chaotic. It would be precise, clever, and unstoppable. Now, dear viewer, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. Or tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone you trusted? What would you do in my place? This is only the beginning. The moment I realized betrayal was coming. The moment I decided to turn it into power. David and Melissa had no idea what I was capable of. The next morning, I moved carefully, letting every small detail sink in. David and Melissa were convinced they had already won. They didn't notice the subtle shift in my demeanor, the quiet determination in my eyes. The way my mind was already racing ahead, planning every move. I started by reviewing my finances. The investments they had dismissed as trivial were quietly flourishing. Real estate holdings. Small businesses I had helped start years ago, they were all under my control. Every account, every asset, every document meticulously maintained. Their assumption that I was powerless was their first mistake. Melissa came into the kitchen, smiling too confidently. "Mom, you should relax. We'll make sure you're comfortable," she said. Her tone was patronizing, but I ignored it. I had learned long ago that patience is a weapon. Reacting emotionally now would only give them more control. David joined her, holding a stack of documents. "Mom, the papers. This is for your safety. Trust us." He said trust. That word made me laugh quietly to myself. Trust was earned, not assumed. I leaned against the counter, pretending to examine the papers. Safety. You mean control, I said softly. Funny, I thought I was the one making decisions here. Their smiles faltered. I could see doubt creeping in, subtle but undeniable. That small crack gave me leverage. I didn't need confrontation. I needed a strategy. Every move I made now had to build their uncertainty while strengthening my position. I spent the day quietly organizing my resources. Calls to old colleagues, emails to business contacts, and subtle reminders to people who had underestimated me in the past. Each action was calculated, a quiet assertion of power. Melissa might have thought she was clever, but she had never faced someone who turned patience and intellect into an invisible weapon. By evening, I had drafted my first steps, launch a small advisory service, highlight my achievements publicly, and demonstrate influence in subtle but undeniable ways. Every small success would remind them of what they had tried to ignore. David noticed the shift. He hesitated, watching me with a mixture of fear and respect. Mom, maybe we misjudged. I smiled faintly. Misjudged? Perhaps. But it's never too late to learn. Melissa, unaware of the growing momentum behind my calm demeanor, continued her subtle control tactics. But the reality was this: I was already ahead. Every plan, every investment, every connection was a silent demonstration of power. That night, as I sat by the window watching the quiet neighborhood, I felt the familiar spark of determination. They thought they could erase me, send me away, and strip me of influence. But I had learned long ago that true power is quiet, deliberate, and unstoppable. The betrayal had ignited something within me. And now the game has truly begun. The following morning, I woke up before anyone else. The house was quiet, but the tension lingered like a low hum. David and Melissa were moving cautiously, unsure of how to proceed now that I had subtly shifted the balance. I poured myself coffee and let my thoughts settle. Each move I made would need to be precise, careful, deliberate, and effective. I reviewed the investments I had quietly maintained over the years. Stocks, properties, even a small chain of businesses. David and Melissa thought were insignificant all under my name. The papers they had forced him to sign didn't give them the power they believed. And soon they would see it. Melissa entered the kitchen, her smile a little forced this time. Mom, you should rest. You've been busy, she said, her voice attempting authority. But I noticed the subtle tension in her posture. She was beginning to realize that her control was slipping. I leaned on the counter, sipping coffee slowly. Rest. I think I'll focus on something more productive, I replied calmly, like securing what truly belongs to me. David hesitated, glancing at the documents he had left on the table. He was starting to see that this was no longer a simple matter of care or responsibility. His assumption that I would be passive, compliant, had been completely wrong. Over the next few hours, I quietly contacted trusted colleagues and associates. I began arranging meetings, subtly letting the world know I was still active, influential, and far from powerless. Every email, every phone call, every confirmed appointment was a step toward reclaiming authority and demonstrating my intelligence. Melissa tried to intercept my actions. Mom, maybe you're overdoing it, she said, her voice tight with frustration. Why push so hard? I looked at her steadily. Because I've been underestimated for too long. And underestimated people are dangerous once they decide to act. David looked uneasy. Mom, we didn't think. Maybe we misjudged you. I let a small smile creep across my lips. Misjudged? Perhaps. But now you're learning, aren't you? The evening brought another revelation. I discovered that a few of the properties they assumed were theirs had legal documents, naming me as the primary owner. Their assumption that I had no control was false. The quiet satisfaction that surged through me was both thrilling and empowering. I spent the night planning the next phase of my strategy. My revenge wouldn't be loud or confrontational. It would be clever, strategic, and unstoppable. Every move I made would quietly assert my influence and slowly dismantle the false sense of control David and Melissa had assumed. As I leaned back in my chair, watching the moonlight spill into the living room, I whispered to myself, "They tried to erase me, but they don't realize the storm they've awakened." And in that moment, I knew the tide had turned. The betrayal had lit a fire within me that nothing could extinguish. Their underestimation would be their greatest mistake. The next morning, I woke up with purpose. Every moment counted. And David and Melissa were unaware of how much ground I was already reclaiming. I moved quietly through the house, mentally cataloging what they believed was theirs and what, in reality, still lay firmly in my control. Melissa tried her usual charm when she entered the kitchen. "Mom, why are you always so involved? Maybe you should let us handle things," she said, her tone tinged with impatience. I looked at her steadily. Because letting go is easy, but control requires intelligence and patience, qualities you clearly underestimate. David lingered near the doorway, unsure whether to intervene. He had begun to notice the subtle changes the way I spoke with calm authority, how I was already acting, organizing, preparing. They had assumed old age meant weakness. They were beginning to understand that age brought wisdom and strategy. I spent the day going over my records, confirming property ownership, double-checking accounts, and quietly reaching out to business contacts who had once underestimated me. Every small action was deliberate, a meeting scheduled here, a reminder sent there, a quiet assertion of influence that Melissa and David didn't even notice at first. By late afternoon, I had a list of allies, people who respected me and were ready to support my initiatives. My advisory plan was taking shape, and each small victory quietly undermined their false sense of control. Melissa attempted to comment on my busyness, but I ignored her subtle provocations. The reality was clear. The power was shifting. David approached, hesitating, "Mom, maybe we didn't fully understand. We assumed." I let my gaze meet his. "You assumed I would comply. You assumed I would be erased quietly. That was your first mistake." Melissa's smile faltered. I could see the frustration building. She had always been the strategist, the one manipulating from behind the scenes. But her tools were ineffective against someone who had patience, intelligence, and a quiet determination to reclaim what was hers. The evening brought a small, satisfying discovery. A document Melissa thought she controlled showed I retained primary authority. The realization filled me with quiet satisfaction. I was not powerless. Their assumptions had been completely wrong. I sat by the window, the sun setting softly over the neighborhood. The betrayal that had felt like a wound was now fuel. Every misjudgment they had made, every attempt to diminish me, became a stepping stone toward empowerment. I whispered softly to myself, they thought I was weak, but they had no idea how unstoppable I could be. By nightfall, my plan was clear. Their attempts to send me away, to diminish my influence, had only strengthened me. The real game was beginning, and every step I would take from now on would be precise, calculated, and unstoppable. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. Every moment counted. Every decision mattered. David and Melissa were still acting as if they had control, but cracks in their assumptions were becoming visible. The truth was, I had already started reclaiming my influence quietly, carefully, effectively. I began contacting trusted colleagues and old business partners. Simple calls, emails, nothing obvious. But each reminded people I was active, intelligent, and capable. While Melissa tried to dominate the household with subtle comments and feigned concern, she didn't realize that every quiet action, of mine was slowly undermining her sense of power. David approached mid-morning, holding a folder of documents. "Mom, the papers, the properties. We underestimated your control," he admitted uneasily. I smiled faintly. "Misjudged me. Perhaps. But this is only the beginning." Melissa tried a forced laugh. "Mom, maybe you're overextending. This isn't necessary." I looked at her calmly. "Necessary. Everything I do now is about reclaiming what is mine. Not revenge, but justice. For respect. For power they assumed I no longer had." By afternoon, I had organized meetings with clients and associates who had dismissed my ideas before. Each confirmed engagement quietly amplified my reputation and influence. David and Melissa were noticing, though they didn't yet understand the full extent. The person they thought was weak had been building strength all along. The betrayal forced me to awaken a side of myself that was strategic, resilient, and unshakable. I began turning every underestimated action into opportunity. The advisory firm I planned was ready to launch. Each step calculated to assert authority and demonstrate capability. Evening arrived, and I sat with my laptop reviewing messages from clients and followers. Each note, each confirmation, was a small victory. Melissa peeked over my shoulder, eyes wide. Realizing control was slipping further from her grasp. David's voice trembled, "Mom, we didn't see this coming." I smiled deliberately. It's never too late to learn. Lessons learned under pressure are the ones remembered most. And now, viewers, if you're watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the next part of my story. Every betrayal has a lesson, and every underestimation can turn into unstoppable power. By nightfall, the game of strategy and influence had shifted entirely. The house was quiet, but I could feel the invisible currents moving toward me. Melissa's forced authority, David's hesitations. Their assumptions they were crumbling under what they failed to recognize. My strength, intelligence, and unwavering determination. The stage was set. The next steps would unfold with precision, and their disbelief would grow with every calculated move I made. The betrayal that had felt like a wound was now my greatest advantage. My revenge would be quiet, clever, and unstoppable. The following days were a delicate dance. David and Melissa moved cautiously, trying to assert control. But every step they took revealed their miscalculation. I had already set plans into motion they couldn't see. Each call I made, each meeting quietly arranged, was a subtle assertion of power. I was reclaiming authority in ways they could neither anticipate nor stop. Melissa continued her manipulations, projecting confidence. "Mom, maybe you should slow down," she said, feigning concern. But I noticed tension beneath her smile, the hesitation, the creeping doubt. David watched silently, unsure whose side he was truly on. The quiet woman they thought weak was no longer passive. I spent hours reviewing legal documents, confirming ownership, and contacting advisors strategically. Every action was intentional. They assumed ignorance, but I had knowledge and foresight. Betrayal had sparked a meticulous plan. My influence would grow publicly. My decisions would shape outcomes. And every underestimated move would reinforce my strength. That evening, I met with key associates ready to back my initiatives. The advisory firm I had been planning was about to launch quietly, subtly demonstrating influence in ways David and Melissa could not counter. Every handshake, every acknowledgement of my capabilities was a calculated reminder of power they had tried to dismiss. Melissa's frustration became apparent. She whispered to David, attempting to reclaim authority. But I observed carefully, letting their unease grow. They didn't realize that my patience and strategy were more powerful than any confrontation. I reached out to old friends with business ties. Casual conversations, small collaborations, subtle mentions of my activities, all designed to showcase my presence and intellect. Slowly, the community noticed. People who had once underestimated me now reached out for guidance and opportunities. David confronted me one evening. "Mom, I don't understand how you've done all this quietly. We thought we had control, but..." He trailed off, awe and fear in his eyes. I smiled knowingly. Control isn't taken by force. David, it's claimed through intelligence, persistence, and subtle influence. You'll see results soon enough. Melissa, desperate, tried another tactic, but it was too late. My network was solid, influence visible, and strategy had momentum. I had transformed their betrayal into fuel, their underestimation into opportunity. Sitting in my living room that night, I reflected on how far I had come. The betrayal had been personal and shocking, but it awakened a power within me I hadn't fully realized. Every plan, contact, and move had been executed perfectly. The stage was set for the final act. David and Melissa still didn't understand the scale of what they had underestimated. When they finally realized, it would be too late. My revenge wouldn't be loud, it would be precise, clever, and unstoppable. The countdown had begun. Every hidden truth, overlooked asset, and underestimated ability would soon come into focus. The power I had quietly amassed ensured that I not they controlled the outcome. The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, but I barely noticed. My mind was alive with anticipation. Today, everything I had planned would come into focus. David and Melissa still thought they had the upper hand, but they had no idea how carefully every detail had been orchestrated. I started the day by reviewing the final documents, ensuring that my assets, investments, and legal rights were fully secured. Years of underestimation, betrayal, and secrecy had led me to this moment. Each signature, each account, each property quietly placed under my control was a reminder of the power they had ignored. Melissa tried to act casually when she entered the room. "Mom, are you ready for the family meeting?" she asked, voice tight with forced cheer. David trailed behind, unsure, hesitant. I gave them a small smile, calm, collected, and confident. They didn't know that the game had already ended. The meeting began. I revealed the truth, piece by piece, deliberately, letting them absorb the shock gradually. The documents, the accounts, the agreements, they all proved that I had quietly amassed influence and control, far beyond what they had imagined. Melissa's smile faltered. David's hands trembled slightly. They were both speechless. "You thought I was weak," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You tried to send me away, dismiss me, make me feel invisible. But I wasn't powerless. Every action, every decision I took has brought me here. And now the control is mine." Melissa stammered. "But we didn't know." I interrupted gently, almost with pity. "That's the point. Underestimation is dangerous. You assumed I was fragile, but I was patient, observant, and clever. Every betrayal, every secret, every attempt to diminish me became fuel for my success. And now the outcome is clear." David looked at me, finally understanding the depth of what had happened. "Mom, we never imagined." "You never had to," I replied calmly. "It was never about imagination. It was about action, intelligence, and perseverance. I didn't retaliate with anger or loud confrontation. I reclaimed my strength through choices, strategy, and success." Melissa finally broke down, realizing that her attempts to dominate and manipulate had failed completely. She had underestimated me, as David had. The power I had quietly built, the influence I had nurtured, and the respect I had earned, all were now undeniable. I concluded the meeting, knowing that the lesson had been delivered. I had turned betrayal into empowerment, personal pain into victory, and underestimation into leverage. Their disbelief was complete. I had transformed the situation without confrontation, without anger, and without violence, only through intelligence, strategy, and persistence. As the day ended, I looked around my home, now filled with quiet satisfaction. The betrayal that had once felt like a wound had become the catalyst for my triumph. My revenge was complete, not loud, not aggressive, but clever, precise, and undeniable. Until next time, see you in the next video.